Hello again, everyone. I am Dr. Flux, and this is General Psychology. Welcome to the final lecture of Module 2. Over the past two lectures, we've explored how psychologists design studies and ensure their findings are reliable, from operationalizing variables to running controlled experiments. We've seen how science helps us separate fact from fiction. But today, we're tackling an equally important question. How do we ensure that research respects the rights, dignity, and well-being of the people involved? Before we jump into that, let's quickly review some key ideas from Lecture 2.2. Which of the following is not an essential feature of an experiment? Is it A, manipulation of an independent variable, or IV? B, the Rosenthal effect? C, measurement of a dependent variable, or DV? Or D, placebo control? The answer here is B, the Rosenthal effect. Which common study bias involves participants acting in ways that they think are more acceptable rather than how they would typically respond? Is it A, the social desirability bias? B, the placebo effect? C, the Rosenthal effect? Or D, demand characteristics? The answer here is A, the social desirability bias. Now let's shift our focus to today's topic, ethics in research. In this lecture, we'll be discussing a horrifying abuse of ethics that occurred in Tuskegee, Alabama. We'll be reviewing several different ethical principles in research, as well as the organizations that enforce them, institutional review boards. We'll then be getting into the replication crisis in science before concluding and reviewing. What if I told you that in the pursuit of knowledge, some researchers have ignored basic principles of human dignity and respect? Would you say that's acceptable if it leads to groundbreaking discoveries? This attitude, valuing knowledge above ethics, has led to some of the darkest chapters in scientific history. One infamous example is the Tuskegee syphilis study, a case that highlights the devastating consequences of unethical research. To start, let's watch a brief video that outlines what happened during this study. This video comes from the YouTube channel Night Terror and is available through a Creative Commons license with attribution.
The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male, to give this next experiment its full title, was an extremely unethical study conducted between 1932 and 1972 by the US Public Health Service. To begin, 600 participants, all of which were impoverished African American men, many of whom had never visited a doctor before, were told that they would be receiving free health care from the United States government to treat bad blood, a term used in the area to refer to a variety of health issues. However, not only were none of the participants informed of their actual diagnosis, none gave any sort of informed consent that indicated they agreed to taking part in a clinical study of this nature. Of the 600 unknowing participants, 399 had already contracted syphilis prior to the study, and 201 formed the control group of participants who did not have the disease. During the study, the men were given no effective care or treatment for syphilis, and instead were given things such as aspirin and mineral supplements, things which the researchers knew were ineffective against the disease. Treatment, however, was not the purpose of this particular study, and as the name suggests, the real research being conducted during this 40-year experiment was on the natural history of untreated syphilis and its devastating effects on the human body. Some 15 years after the study began, penicillin had become the recognized standard treatment for syphilis. However, researchers continued to leave the participants without effective treatment, and withheld penicillin and information about it from participants, even going so far as to deny them access to treatment programs that were being offered to other local residents. One particularly shocking aspect of this whole event was that it was revealed that in 1996, a full 6 years prior to the termination of the study, Peter Buxton, a venereal disease investigator from San Francisco, sent a letter to the National Director of the Division of Venereal Diseases, expressing his concerns about the ethics of this particular study. The Center for Disease Control, or CDC for short, which controlled the study by that time, had stated that the study would continue until all subjects had died. The study, however, only concluded when a leak was finally made to the press in 1972, which led to the termination of the experiment on the 16th of November that same year. Tragically, by the end of the study, of the 399 men who originally had previously contracted the disease, only 74 of them were still alive. 28 of them had died from the disease itself. Another 100 died from related complications. 40 of their wives had been infected with the disease, and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. If any good came out of this experiment, it's that in 1974, Congress passed the National Research Act and also created a commission, the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research, whose purpose is to study and write regulations governing studies involving human participants. The result of which now requires that participants must give informed consent, must be informed of a diagnosis, and the studies themselves must provide an accurate report of the results.
Take a moment to think about what you just saw. This study involved deliberate deception, harm, and the exploitation of vulnerable individuals, all in the name of research. The Tuskegee syphilis study serves as a stark reminder why ethical guidelines and research are not just important, they are absolutely essential. They protect participants, uphold human dignity, and ensure that science serves society responsibly. So how do we prevent tragedies like Tuskegee from happening again? The Tuskegee syphilis study highlights the dire consequences of ignoring ethics in research. To ensure that science respects human dignity, the scientific community follows a set of ethical principles. These principles act as guide rails, protecting participants and ensuring that research is conducted responsibly. We'll be discussing 5 different principles: voluntary participation, informed consent, minimizing risk of harm, confidentiality, and anonymity. The first principle is voluntary participation. People must freely choose to participate in research without coercion or undue pressure. Imagine a study offering prisoners lavish rewards for participation. While tempting, this creates coercion, as prisoners might feel that they can't refuse due to their limited circumstances. We uphold this by using clear communication that participation in a study is optional. We ensure that there are no penalties for choosing not to participate or withdrawing. Next is informed consent, which ensures that participants know what they're agreeing to. This means explaining the study's purpose, procedures, potential risks, and participant rights. A researcher might downplay the risks of a study or fail to mention potential side effects of a treatment. Without full disclosure, participants can't make informed decisions. We uphold this by using clear, non-technical language in consent forms. We provide opportunities for participants to ask questions before agreeing to take part. Researchers have an obligation to minimize potential harm, both physical and psychological. Imagine a study that induces high levels of stress in participants without offering support or safeguards. This can lead to lasting emotional harm. We minimize these risks by conducting risk assessments before beginning a study. We also offer support resources like counseling if distress occurs. Confidentiality means keeping participants' information private and secure. Participants should trust that their data won't be shared without their permission. A researcher studying sensitive topics like drug use might accidentally reveal a participant's identity in a presentation. This breaches their trust and privacy. We respect confidentiality by using pseudonyms or codes instead of real names when presenting data. We store data securely with encryption and restricted access. Anonymity goes a step further, ensuring that participants are completely unidentifiable, even to the researchers. An online survey that collects IP addresses without participants' knowledge would be something that would compromise anonymity. We uphold anonymity by avoiding collecting identifying information unless absolutely necessary. We also use tools that can anonymize responses, like secure survey platforms, when collecting data. Let's do an attention check. What is the primary purpose of informed consent in research? Is it A, to ensure participants fully understand the study and voluntarily agree to participate? B, to allow researchers to collect identifying information for follow-up studies? C, to prevent participants from withdrawing once they've agreed to participate? Or D, to ensure researchers can minimize costs and maximize sample size? The correct answer is A. Informed consent ensures participants understand the study, including its risks, benefits, and voluntarily agree to take part. Let's reflect. Think about a scientific study that we've discussed in class, or maybe one that you've read elsewhere. What ethical principles do you think it followed? Do you have any concerns? Ethics isn't just about following rules. It's about fostering trust and ensuring that research benefits society without exploiting individuals. Take a moment to think about the principles that we've been discussing and how they ensure responsible science. Now, while individual researchers uphold these principles, they don't work alone. Institutions play a critical role in enforcing ethical standards through institutional review boards, or IRBs. IRBs are committees tasked with reviewing research proposals to ensure they meet ethical standards. They serve as gatekeepers, protecting participants while ensuring studies are conducted responsibly. IRBs oversee research in several key ways. The first is by reviewing proposals. Researchers submit detailed plans outlining their study's purpose, methods, and potential risks. IRBs assess risks and benefits. They evaluate whether the potential benefit of the research outweighs any risk to the participants. And finally, they ensure compliance. IRBs confirm that studies followed ethical guidelines, such as obtaining informed consent and protecting confidentiality. Imagine a researcher proposing a study on stress involving high-pressure tasks. The IRB might ask, are participants fully informed of the potential risks? Are there support systems like counseling in place if participants become distressed? Is the study designed to minimize harm while achieving its goals? Here's what the IRB process typically looks like. It begins with proposal submission. Researchers provide a detailed plan, including recruitment methods, consent forms, and how data will be handled. Then there's the review process. The IRB evaluates the proposal, often involving multiple members with diverse expertise and experience. Finally, there's feedback, revision, and ultimate approval. The IRB might request revisions to address ethical concerns before granting approval for a study. No research involving human participants can proceed without IRB approval. Why is this oversight so critical? Let's revisit the Tuskegee syphilis study for context. If an IRB had existed during that time, it's likely the study would have never been approved. An IRB would have flagged the lack of informed consent, the deliberate withholding of treatment, and the exploitation of a vulnerable population. IRBs are a safeguard against such ethical abuses, ensuring that participants' rights and dignity are protected. We've talked about how ethics safeguard participants and ensure fairness in research, but ethics alone don't guarantee that the results of a study are reliable. In recent years, psychology and other scientific fields have faced a significant challenge: the replication crisis. What does this mean? It means that many studies, when repeated, fail to produce the same results as the original. And in science, replication is crucial. It's how we confirm that findings are robust and not just flukes. There are several reasons why some studies don't replicate, ranging from pressures within academia to subtle errors in research design. Let's explore some of the most common culprits. The first is publication bias. Journals love positive results, studies that show significant effects, but this creates a problem. Studies that don't find an effect often go unpublished, even if they're just as valid. This is sometimes referred to as the file drawer problem. Many null result findings, or findings that weren't exactly positive but are still scientifically valid, are relegated to the back of a filing cabinet, rather than being published in a journal. This leads to the published literature becoming skewed, giving the false impression that certain findings are more reliable than they really are. Then there's p-hacking. Under pressure to publish, some researchers engage in something called p-hacking. This is tweaking their analyses to produce statistically significant results where there might not be any. P in this case refers to the mathematical threshold that we use to evaluate whether research findings are significant or not. Ways to p-hack might include analyzing data in multiple ways and only reporting the ones that work, adding participants after a study is completed to push results over the significance threshold, doing multiple analyses of a dataset without adjusting for multiple comparisons. These behaviors can lead to findings that seem statistically significant, but might not hold up under scrutiny. Small sample sizes can also produce unreliable results because they don't adequately represent a population. For example, a study with 20 participants might show a strong effect just by chance, but when repeated with 200 participants, that effect might disappear. Then there are differences in methodology. Even small differences in how a study is conducted, like participant demographics or slight changes in instructions, can influence results. This makes it harder to replicate findings exactly. Then there's contextual factors. Psychological phenomena don't exist in a vacuum. They're influenced by cultural, societal, and historical factors. A study conducted in one time or place might not generalize to another because of this. To address these challenges, more researchers are embracing open science practices, a movement towards greater transparency and accountability in research. Key practices include things like pre-registration, where researchers publicly outline their hypotheses and methods before collecting data, reducing the risk of p-hacking. Sharing data and materials. This makes raw data and study materials available for others to verify and replicate findings. Then there's increasing the prevalence of publishing null results, encouraging journals to publish studies that don't find significant effects, balancing the research landscape. By adopting these practices, we can rebuild trust in research and strengthen the foundation of scientific knowledge. Let's reflect. Imagine you're designing a study. How would you ensure your findings are replicable and transparent? Which open science practices would you adopt? This is a question every researcher should ask themselves. Replication isn't just a scientific necessity. It's a commitment to integrity and truth. Today, we explored two fundamental challenges in psychological research: maintaining ethics and ensuring reliability. Let's take a moment to review what we've learned. We reviewed the atrocities that occurred in the Tuskegee study. We examined the core principles of voluntary participation, informed consent, risk minimization, confidentiality, and anonymity. These principles protect participants and ensure that research respects human dignity. Institutional review boards, or IRBs, play a critical role in overseeing research proposals, assessing risks, and ensuring ethical compliance. Finally, we talked about the replication crisis. The inability to replicate many studies has highlighted issues like publication bias, p-hacking, and small sample sizes. Open science practices like pre-registration and data sharing offer a path forward for restoring trust in research. Let's do a bit of review. Which of the following best describes the purpose of an institutional review board, or IRB? A. To publish significant research findings. B. To ensure that research follows ethical principles and minimizes the risk to participants. C. To replicate studies and verify their results. Or D. To train researchers on statistical analysis techniques. The correct answer is B. IRBs ensure that studies are ethically sound and that participants are protected. What is one key practice of open science that addresses the replication crisis? A. Using small sample sizes to reduce complexity. B. Publishing only statistically significant findings. C. Pre-registering hypotheses and methods before conducting a study. Or D. Avoiding replication studies to focus on novel research. If you guessed C, you got it. Pre-registration increases transparency and reduces the likelihood of questionable research practices. As we wrap up, consider this. Ethics and replication are not just challenges, they're opportunities. They remind us that science isn't perfect, but it is self-correcting. By prioritizing respect for participants and striving for transparency, we encourage that research meaningfully builds our knowledge base for the benefit of humanity. Trust isn't built overnight, but through careful, ethical, and reliable work, we can build a stronger foundation for the future of psychology and science as a whole. This includes Module 2 on research methods. In our next module, we'll shift gears and take a look at cognitive models of psychology. But as you move forward, carry these lessons with you, because ethical and reliable research is the backbone of everything we do. As always, thank you for joining me on this journey into the science of the mind. Stay curious, stay resilient, and above all, live life in flux. Flux out.